Brand new ballet getting us started today on Corby Radio, the voice of Corby no less. It is now nearly 9 after 12. Now, the general election is happening a week on Thursday. It's happening in Corby as well as everywhere else, of course. 5 candidates are standing in the Corby constituency. And this week, we're looking to hear from all of them in turn on the afternoon show. We've been posing questions on key issues, some of them provided by some of our listeners. Now, today, we have the candidate standing for the UK Independence Party, UKIP, and that's Margot Parker. Margot, welcome to Corby Radio, first of all.
Thank you very much, Stuart.
OK, first of all, Margot, just tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a serving MEP. I live in the constituency. I've got an office in Corby Old Village. I stood at the by-election and I stood for County Council, so I kind of feel that we're really very well connected in Corby. It's a great place. People are fabulous. We've got some good friends and we hope our policies really will appeal to the people of Corby.
We're going to ask a few questions today that we're asking the candidates this week, some of them provided by our listeners. The first of them comes from Marcus, and he says, if you had to make further cuts to public services, where should they be made?
I'm very unhappy with this because I believe there is enough money in the system not to make those public cuts. I think it's wrong. It's what you do with the money you've got. I mean, we've said that, we pledge $3 billion definitely into the NHS because that's really important, so we wouldn't make no cuts there. We know more money needs to be spent on schools. We know that we don't have enough social housing. We want to get rid of the bedroom tax, so we'd make no cuts in those areas. We think that you've got to look after the people you represent, so we're not there to make cuts. We say that it's how you manage the money in a better way.
The argument's been, of course, that public service cuts have had to be made to have the manager of the deficit, as it were, in debt. I mean, how would you address the other part of it?
Yeah, no, that is important. And it doesn't matter which party, is there, whether it's Lib, Lab, Cons, it's always the same. They have borrowed a huge amount of money and Labour left a massive debt. There's no doubt about that. They can't hide away from it. And I would say that the Tories and the Lib Dems have not done anything to address this debt. In fact, they're borrowing more money to give away. So it's a bit like you popping along to your local bank and saying, 20 quid, yeah, but I'll get that. I'll give it away. Oh, wait a minute, I'm going to be short of something else this week. So it's about being sensible. I mean, we're giving away 12 billion in foreign aid, and that's got nothing to do with the disaster, by the way, which is, naturally people will stand up and deal with that in Nepal, which is a horrific thing. But it's when you give money away and you can't account for it. It goes to perhaps African dictators. We're not talking about not stepping up and helping people when they desperately need it. Of course we do. And British people are, by the way, the most generous. They absolutely always dig in their pockets and they do step up to the plate. So I think they're a bit irresponsible with this huge overseas funding that they've all sort of, if you like, bought into. I think that's irresponsible. We obviously, from the EU, we've got 55 million every day. Boy, we could do a hell of a lot with that, for sure.
Right. Corby is a town built on migration, both internal and external to the UK. How big a part does this play in the future of the town, and what attitude do you take towards the movement of labour?
It's the movement of cheap, unskilled labour, and I think, you've got to pay the living wage, you've got to have decent employers, but when I get young people coming to me and say, I can't get a job in the local food factory, for a number of reasons, because often those jobs are advertised in Eastern Europe, and by the way, the EU facilitates a handsome amount of money to give people to come from Eastern Europe, and those jobs are advertised there. So it's not giving local people a look in. And recently on another talk show, some guy called in and he said, look, I'm 52, I've been made redundant in Corby. What are my chances? Now, we ought to be able to get that guy a job, for sure. I mean, I'm ashamed that we are not dealing with our unemployment in a much more upfront way. What
do you consider, or what do UKIP consider to be an unskilled worker? When you say not bringing unskilled workers in terms of migration? Yeah, I mean, people coming in that have no skills specifically. I mean, it's kind of different if you've got skilled engineers, if you've got, nurses, if you've got doctors, and they're free to come in and apply. But we say they should be able to be free to apply from other parts of the world, including the Commonwealth. They're discriminated against as far as that's concerned. But I do think you look after your local guys. You've got to give them that opportunity.
Corby. It's quite wrong when people leave school and colleges and they're struggling to try and get a job. And when people say to me, oh, young people are lazy, I don't buy that. I don't buy it at all. Most people, young guys, want to get out there. They want money in their pocket. Of course they want to go to work.
Yeah. Now, Dave asks about jobs. He says, well, we've said the number of out of work benefits in Corby, it's now down to the same percentage as it was in May 2007, but youth unemployment still cited as a problem. And Dave asks, how would you help attract more jobs to the town?
Well, I think, to be quite honest, it's extremely difficult. If I were a free sort of MP, not being, and I would be as a UKIP MP, but if I were free and I didn't have the restrictions of what Europe tells me I can and cannot do, I'd be going out to career. I'd be saying, come on, guys, we've got a great workforce in Corby. We've got lots of skills. We're training our young people up in great apprenticeships, in engineering. So, if you have a manufacturing company, I'd want to attract them to come to Corby, and in this constituency especially. So I'd want a free hand to be able to do that. Can't do that with the restrictions that are on us, but I'd do everything I could to talk up the great people of Corby, because they're hardworking, they always have been, and they always will be.
So you're basically saying you can't do that, in your view, unless you get out of the European Union? Yeah,
because you've got restrictions. Europe tells you what you can and can't do. I mean, we've got so many restrictions that peter down into every law, which actually emanates from 80% comes from Europe. I mean, they tell us exactly what we can and what we can't do. The parameters are there.
Well, I think generally we know what you keep thinking about the EU, but it comes into our next question, actually, because Corby did win assisted area status from the EU, so firms can apply for funds. Ventures like Growing Corby use the European Regional Development Fund. Is it valuable to retain a close business relationship with Europe?
Of course it's valuable to be trading with Europe, and that's what most people thought we had initially. It's become a political union, which of course is another matter. Trade, absolutely, no problem at all. But when it comes to the funding, don't forget, for every £3 we put in, we get £1 back. I don't think that's very good value for money. It's our own money we are recycling back again. And with the restrictions that the EU puts on us, I say we're big enough to be able to govern ourselves. I say we can spend our own money how we want. And that, I believe, is what most normal people would want.
How do you facilitate, though, say, for instance, a trade agreement with the EU if you're outside the EU? How does that work?
Oh, quite simply. I mean, goodness sake, there are dozens of countries that have separate trade agreements with the EU. And by the way, Iceland pulled out of joining only a matter of a few weeks ago. They said, well, you know what? We don't need it. We can manage quite nicely without it. Switzerland has a great time. Very wealthy country. It goes on. Singapore, all of these smaller countries manage very well. I believe in actually being very proud of this country, proud of our workforce, proud of what we can achieve, because I know we've got the track record and I know we've got the guts to do it.
OK, some people are looking to get on the housing ladder or receive support as a private renter or with obtaining social housing. What support, if needed, will they receive from yourself if elected?
Honestly, I'm pretty upset that we don't have enough social housing here in Corby. I think we have not building enough, and it's affordable housing too that's important. And when I look at the bedroom tax, which is I think a really unfair, I mean, that's so unfair. They don't have the stock to be able to say to people, well, OK, you've got to move out of your house. Then you've got to look at the social angle to this. So if you've got an elderly person that's, maybe got 2 bedrooms and you want to move her somewhere miles away from her family, I think you must look at the overall picture of what's right for people. Be a bit more caring, understand their needs. But we don't have enough housing, and we've got a growing population. We've got people that can't get to their kids into the schools of their choice. It's extremely hard to get a doctor's appointment. It goes on and on and on because we simply keep importing more and more people without the ability to be able to have more and more affordable housing.
On healthcare, we've seen in recent years the opening of Corby Urgent Care Centre, but demand from across party lines for better services out of KGH. Problems remain with waiting times, such as paramedic response times. How do you propose to help improve the healthcare offer for Corby?
Well, I think, the walk-in centre has helped, there's no doubt about that. But it's, my husband can't get an appointment to see his own doctor. It's 4.5 weeks to get his own doctor here in Corby. You can see another doctor, perhaps within a couple of weeks. But we're piling this pressure of more and more people needing the services, our health services. And that in itself, you can throw money at it. But recently, only a matter of a few weeks ago, I ended up in A&E for about 11 hours with a close family member, and I saw how hard the medical staff work there. They work their socks off. They can't work any harder. But, you know, when the doctor's surgeries close, people seem to automatically go into A&E because, you know, naturally, if they've got a problem, they've got a child with a savage temperature, and they need to be reassured, and you know, nobody would fall out about that. But it's the pressure and the numbers that simply are unsustainable, and they really are. They've got to think smarter. They've got to, I think we've got far too many managers and a lot of tick box mentality going on in the NHS. So, you know, let's bring in more nurses, let's try and get more doctors, but let's train more nurses locally. You know, let's make that an easier proposition. Let's train nurses on the job. That's another issue that UKIP's passionate about. I mean, my mum was a nurse. You know, she was trained in the hospital. She worked the wards, you know. It kind of is getting back to those core values where nursing is a vocation and a wonderful vocation, and only a few people can actually step up to do that. It's quite a specialist, and it's a tough job.
Corby now has a free school as well as new primary schools. Do you agree with these models the schools are run to? How is the issue of school places to be dealt with?
Well, it is difficult. I mean, you know, I went to a local grammar school in Grantham, and you know, there's nothing to hold people back from any background. If you're bright enough to get to a grammar school, fair enough. But I passionately believe that all schools must train our young people to a standard where they can leave, they're able to get a job, they're fit for purpose. I also believe that the schools and colleges need to train more people in apprenticeships and meaningful apprenticeships with lots of local businesses, you know, having an input into those schools and colleges. I think it's critically important that they say, well, look, we're looking for young people, and these are the skills we want. In Germany, amazingly enough, they have a great system there where small businesses get involved, you know, with their education system. But of course, they've got a lot more manufacturing, which of course I'd love to see, you know, much more of that in and around Corby for sure.
We're already, of course, the manufacturing capital of the UK, I believe. But on the issue of just school places, I mean, how would UKIP deal with that? Because obviously it's still an issue where people are sort of struggling to get school places, it seems.
Well, it's a matter of managing the population. And, you know, whilst we simply don't know how many people are sort of coming in, you can't really plan for that. It's terribly unfair, I think, to sort of throw this at local authorities and say they don't know how many people are going to be coming into the country. You know, they may have 1,000, I don't know, in every 2 months. I've no idea. And until we know what these numbers are, it's going to be a very difficult problem to fix.
Malk asks, what support do you want to see given to the police locally?
Oh, yeah, plenty of support. We don't want to see their numbers cut, that's for sure. I mean, there's no doubt about that. These guys are on the front line. They do a terrific job, and, you know, we need more of them. I'd like to see more police out there. I know it's a bit of an old cliche, you know, seeing the Bobby on the beat, but even if you see, you know, the Panda car driving around and you go, well, great. I want to see more presence, and we want to have more police. I don't want to see them cut back. And I know there are changes in policing where, you know, smart technology takes place, and it does actually help the police force, but there's no substitute for seeing your local policeman.
Of course, all of this recruitment would cost money as well as everything else. So, I mean, have UKIP sort of costed all that?
Yeah, we have. I mean, our manifesto, quite honestly, was put out for independent costing. It's the only one that has been. We've said this is what we can afford. We've said where we'll take the money from, and we've said what we will do and how we will actually distribute it fairly for people. And we do believe in this absolute fairness, because we think, quite honestly, it doesn't matter who you get in, they can promise the earth, the moon and the stars. And we can see they've got a bidding war this week where they're, you know, putting a few billion on here and we're offering that. I mean, it's bizarre, and it's actually quite insulting to the voters to have this sort of situation where each day they're coming up with a new offer. It's a bit like being in the supermarket. We don't buy those special offers. We want reality.
We've got a question here from Heather. As a growing town, do we not need a bigger and better retail offer? Is there anything you can do as MP to help this if elected?
Well, I'd like to see, for a start, you know, any of the small empty shops. I don't want to see that. We approve of 30 minutes free parking. We think this is really important in lots of small shopping parades and high streets where there's lots of empty shops. We don't want to see that. We want to encourage people to be able to set up their business. So we're very pro making full use of, if you like, the empty shops that we've got here. We want to help that. We don't want it to be less. It's very tough for small businesses, by the way, to compete with out-of-town, shopping malls. I mean, it is. And I was actually visiting a small trader last week who, been in business 25 years, was absolutely struggling to get footfall by her shop, and local council were not very helpful, towards her. I mean, she'd actually gone online and tried to reinvent, if you like, her business so that her turnover didn't die completely. But there's a lot we can do, and I think we need to be a bit prouder of our town centres, get them sorted out, and let's get lots of young people in. They've got bright ideas. Let's see if we can't enthuse more local business startups.
David is into what's happening at Corby Rail Station, is excited at the prospect of improvements to services. What would you like to see happen in terms of rail services in and out of Corby?
I'd like to see more trains so that, I don't have to drive to Kettering, and I can, get more frequent trains to London and elsewhere from Corby, yeah. But I think it's great. I think it's a good service. By and large, I'm pretty pleased with it. I travel on some French trains once a month, and, oh dear, not so good.
Really?
Yeah. Out of Paris, going to Strasbourg. Oh, blimey. Don't get excited.
Well, there you go, David. Something to compare in the future for you, perhaps. Tom asks, why is it we order our groceries online, we book gigs online, and we bank online, yet we still chop down trees to print leaflets, flyers, posters, placards, even the ballot papers at election time? This runs into millions of pounds, surely. Why are we still doing it? He's in favour of online voting. Are you?
Well, providing you had the technology, the IT skill to be able to have this as a foolproof thing, yeah, absolutely. However, you've only got to look what's happened in Tower Hamlets this week, and the voting debacle there, and sort of fake votes, and also, postal voting. It seems wide open in some areas to fraud.
A third of people, I think, aren't registered. And obviously there's been a lot of focus on trying to get young people interested. Do you think this might be something to get younger adults interested in the process? Yeah,
probably, absolutely. But, I'm very conscious that it's got to be fair, it's got to be safe. I think that's important. Yeah, whatever it takes, let's look at some new issues and let's see what we can do.
OK, just finally, Margot, if in about 30 seconds or so, you could sum up why people perhaps should vote for you, in your view.
Well, I'm not a professional politician. I've worked in the real world. I've been made redundant. I staggered through that. I've coped with caring for elderly parents. I've done a lot of things that I think give you, if you like, a colourful qualification which enable you to be able to serve the people. The main thing that I think is important is you are a servant of the people. I believe in the recall of a local MP. If you think they're not up to scratch, you know what? Bring them on back. I think, power of the people is very important. I'm passionate about that. I think it's important that we respect the people that vote for us. And a UKIP vote is a free vote because I can't be whipped. I can't be told you've got to vote this way because the party whip is telling you you've got to vote this way. I would always act for the local people because that's what I believe in, local democracy.
That's Margot Parker standing for the UK Independence Party in the Corby constituency, also standing in this election. Peter Harris for the Liberal Democrats, and Jonathan Hornet for the Green Party, Tom Pursglove for the Conservatives, Andy Sawford for Labour. Polling day is May the 7th.